Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And today we're bringing you episode 16 of Corporate Cardboard. Fantastic. Here with my co-host, Dan. Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Dan, also known as chairman of the board, and I've got my own YouTube channel, so be sure to check that one out if you want to see more board gaming content.
Yeah, Dan's links are all in the description, puts out some fantastic content. This is episode 16 of Corporate Cardboard, so pretty dang cool. We've almost had, 6 months of Corporate Cardboard so far, starting out the new year fresh, and this is our new year themed, board game variety show today. So anything else to add? How's your new year going so far, Dan?
Yeah, I had a very quiet one today. So yeah, not much happened so far. Not played any games yet, but maybe play one or two tonight. So yeah.
And speaking of games we've been playing, let's go ahead and jump into our first one. This is our first section of the games we've been playing. So Dan, I'm going to go ahead and have you start off. What is the first game that you've been playing so far?
Okay, so the first game I want to talk about is a game called Progress. Evolution of Technology. So this is actually a game going back to, I believe it's 2014, and this was actually published by NSKN, who are Board and Dice now, obviously very successful Euro game publisher. And this one is a card-driven kind of tech tree civilization style game where, as you probably expect, you're starting with very basic technologies such as, the wheel and stuff like that. And then as the game progresses, you are kind of building motor vehicles and then building televisions and all stuff like that. So it has that kind of logical progression that you really like for a for a civilization style game with these massive elaborate tech trees where basic technology stems to other technology. And this is all done used on this card system where you either have to discard cards in order to play other cards, so it's got that kind of multi-use card mechanism, or you can choose to basically research these cards, which means that you'll put a certain amount of cubes on them, and that's basically like a ticking timer where over a certain amount of rounds a cube's going to get removed each round, and then eventually when all the cubes are removed, you've got that card built, and then those cards are going to be prerequisites for other cards, and so on until the game ends. So it's all about getting points, climbing tracks to get points as well, because some of these cards have tracks will let you climb up tracks. Some of these cards let you have these tokens, which will permanently give you kind of more currency to build new cards. Obviously, they have points and all stuff like that. So this is a pretty straightforward civilization game. And to be honest, that really worked for me on this one because civilization games in general, usually on the more involved, more complex side of things, normally very involved kind of kitchen sink style games where they throw everything in there. This one does hold the reins back a bit and is quite digestible. I played this with a relatively inexperienced gamer and we had a really good time playing it. So a massively pleasant surprise for me and a nice niche for a civilization game. That is Progress.
Wow. So I saw that this rated really highly on your games that you've played this month. And I think that's fantastic. That something like this lightweight is that good. Now, I did have a question about the civilization portion. In a lot of these civilization style games, if you get a card out early, it kind of takes a lot of time to do so, that initial card, but it pays out completely and you get to keep on using that. Is that here as well?
Not really, because a lot of the cards are only prerequisites to a couple of cards, and once that's done, it's kind of done. And the game does a really good job of kind of giving you control to get the cards that you want, because you have this individual player board, and that will let you kind of reshuffle discard piles in and let you draw more cards and things. So you do have quite a lot of autonomy to get the cards that you particularly want into your hand. So I thought it kind of overcame that problem quite well.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Well, this one looks fantastic. As you said, very straightforward. I like the idea of the card play. And I really like games where you can filter and find specific cards. Yeah. So awesome. Fantastic. So that's the first game here. That is Progress. Now, this next game that I want to talk about is a boss battling game, one of my most anticipated for a long time, and it's finally here. This is Townsfolk Tussle. Now, this is a combination of all sorts of games that I've been super into, like Kingdom Death Monster. It takes the boss battling from that. It takes the structure of Too Many Bones, where it's just small encounter after small encounter, and then it also takes this idea of something really cool, this 1920s art style, the Betty Boop, the fantastic cartoon imagery, and it's all put into a single package. And so far, I'm having a lot of fun with it. And it's exactly as I imagined, with a very simple, straightforward gameplay, very small actions, but very robust AI system. And it's something that I'm really enjoying. So, really enjoying Townsfolk Tussle here. In particular, there's lots of these bosses that really drive the game. And I think that's where the big character is going to be coming from. So, right off the bat, each of these bosses has these large boards that you'll be putting on, and it has a setup that has all this terrain attached, and each boss has its own AI deck. And once again, this is very similar to something like King of Death Monster, where each of them has their own unique flow. And this is a positive and a negative, because the way the system works is every time you play, you're going to be drawing 4 random bosses, and you'll set them up in a row, and you'll fight one after another. And every time you fight them, they'll get an ability based on the order in which you fight them. The first one doesn't have an ability. Sometimes it has a hindrance. And then the last one that you fight has its own like special scenario with additional rules that are going to make it more challenging, which I think is a really cool way to scale the challenge throughout things. So that's kind of neat. I really enjoy this. However, this also can be a little frustrating because the AI decks do not change from battle to battle, and you are significantly weaker in that first fight than you are in the later fight. So honestly, the first fight is going to be your determination of, am I going to even have a chance at winning this session? Because if you don't make it through that first fight, you're not going to have the money required to buy items to help you in the further fights. And it can be really rough because your options are very limited in that first section. But once you finish that first fight, I think the game really opens up because you have the money to actually buy things and level up your characters. And these characters are hilarious and fantastic. They have some really cool abilities, and I'm having a lot of fun diving into these. But I do think it's a double-edged sword here. Another thing that I really enjoy about the game is the terrain, and the terrain is so important, especially in those early scenarios, because a lot of the time you can deal big damage with the terrain, and that's pretty significant when your characters are pretty weak. So, for example, you can send a car flying into the dude you're fighting, make them take a bunch of damage, super awesome, or you can request help from a farmer, so that may be where you're putting your action points into. So it's a very straightforward system. The terrain is really important. It can be a little bit a pretty big overhead the first time you play because there's just so much on the board. But once you play a couple of rounds, you know exactly what the terrain does. Oh, yeah, go in the woods, get better shots with your guns. If you go to the barn, you can ask for help. Go to the wishing well, throw some money in, get some items. There's lots of cool things that you can take from. And I think the combination of the weird townsfolk, the ruffians, the different bosses, as well as the terrain make for a really fun game. But it can be dependent on your initial flop of the market and the different items that you have at your disposal that are going to kind of set you up for your entire play experience. So some ups and downs here, but it is one that is fun in my opinion. Any questions on this one, Dan?
So I'm assuming the kind of way you fight things, is it all card driven on cards you're playing from your hands and stuff?
Not quite. This is more in the Kingdom Death Monster vein of things where your characters have a certain number of moxie, and this moxie is your action points, and you can use those to activate the different gear cards in front of you. So, for
Right.
example, your bat might require 1 moxie to swing, or you might have a second weapon in your hand, and you can use both as long as you have the moxie to do so. Same thing with activating the terrain. It's going to cost a certain amount of moxie. So certain characters have different numbers of action points, but they may have different items that require different things. So it just depends on the character, but it's all dice driven and these gear cards that you're going to be picking up in the market to use. So not necessarily a card play like something like Gloomhaven, but definitely more dice driven.
Right, I get you. But love the artwork. It's a fantastic looking game.
Oh, the production is so good. It's beautiful. It has like this card box. Everything is thematically on point. The items themselves are just goofy and fun. I love this. This is one that I'm really enjoying, and just the whole aesthetic is love it. But that's Townsfolk Tussle. If you have any specific questions about these games, please let us know in the comments. And speaking about comments, we have a couple of people here this morning. We have Best at Star Trek joining us. Good morning. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, my goodness. So fantastic. Let's go ahead and talk about our next game. So, Dan, what do you got for me?
Okay, yeah. So the next game, or new to me game that I played since the last episode, is a game that I've been after for a long, long time. Finally, a reprint came out. This is an older game by Leo Colvini called Vabanque. And Vabanque was actually relaunched by a smaller company. I think it was last year on Kickstarter. And it was actually unsuccessful, sadly, but they still managed to go ahead and get a printing out with some minor tweaks, I think, maybe some not so lavish components, but it's still perfectly fine. But yeah, this is a kind of a bluffing, gambling style game, this kind of like Las Vegas feel to it, as you have this big rondel of these kind of gambling tables, basically. And throughout the game, these tables are going to start acquiring money and building up cash where the other people choose to put that cash. Then after that, you are going to be, in turn, placing these cards down. And there's basically 3 cards you have. One is going to be a complete bluff. It's going to have nothing on the reverse side. One of them is going to be a doubling card, which is going to double the value on that table. And if more people play double cards on it, it's going to, quadruple and so on. And the final one is going to be a trap card, where if somebody else lands on that table and, maybe thinks you're bluffing by placing a card there, then you are going to take the money that they would have taken. So this is what this game is basically. It's a pure kind of bluffing game. You are kind of edging your bet, saying, am I willing to potentially get trapped in order to get the big bucks? Am I going to kind of, see through that poker face of my opponent and take the big cash there and think they're bluffing? And that's pretty much what the game is. It has a really good forward trajectory where over the 3 rounds, there's just more money building and building up, meaning that hook to go to these big tables is just, it's sometimes hard to ignore, even if there might be a trap there. But this is a really good time. If you like bluffing games like Skull or something like that, and you love those kind of hustle and bustle, gambling, Las Vegas style games, this one is a great kind of synergy between those, and very accessible. Only plays about 30 to 45 minutes, and it's just creates some really laugh out loud moments. So yeah, really enjoyed this one. That is Vabanque.
So what do you think was the big barrier for people backing this on Kickstarter? Why weren't they drawn in?
I don't know. I think this one just might have faded into obscurity, really, because I don't think many people talk about the original. I think the original's going back, maybe 2001, so 20 years old. And yeah, nobody's really keeping it alive. There's no buzz about it. And I'm not quite sure why it didn't, succeed. But I'm still really happy that they went ahead and did it anyway. But because it's a really good game and it should be in print. Games like this seem to, always, but when they hit the table, they never really fall flat. Everyone's always going to have a good time. So I think games like this should always stick around. But I think it's great, and I think more people should play it. And hopefully, this new printing will mean that can happen.
Sounds fantastic. Usually your recommendations on casino-themed games are pretty on point, so I'll have to give this one a try. Excellent. All right, let's open up to a couple more comments here. So we have Jonathan saying he's never played a boss battler game. I think that Townsfolk Tussle is actually a really approachable boss battler. So it's very easy to get into. There's not a lot of rules overhead. Very, very simple rule set. So I think that might be a great place to start for this genre. And then Best at Star Trek, he really appreciates Chairman of the Board's ventures, seeking out those older games. And I think that's kind of the reason I enjoy Dan's content as well. It's really cool because you take this approach and you're ready to try anything, no matter how old, to see if, hey, does this gameplay stick out? And I love that about your channel.
Oh, thank you kindly. Yeah.
All right, up next, we have a new addition. So, going away from the old, we have this new expansion to a roll and write system that came out last year. This is Super Skill Pinball Ramp It Up. So, I am not a huge fan of the Super Skill Pinball system. However, there is one of the boards in particular that I really enjoy because of the options it presents from turn to turn, and that is going to be the original Dragon Slayer. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but the Dragon Slayer table in the original Super Skill Pinball. So, I was holding out that these new tables would have a draw very similar to that one, where they saw what people enjoyed and they played further into that. But is that the case? If you're not familiar with the game, this is a pinball-themed roll and write game. On your turn, you roll 2 dice, and based on the dice that roll, you're going to pick one of those results and use them to travel around a board. It's a pinball board, so you're going to, if you are at the top here, you have to go to something on the bottom. So, for example, if you're in this red section down here, you go to this yellow section below. So it's a very straightforward system. You're always going down, reaching the flippers, and the flippers are going to launch you up. And unfortunately, to me, the choices in this game are so apparent and so straightforward that they're not really choices. You're kind of just along for the ride, and that's, I think, is dooming for a roll and write game. The freedom of things like Ganshan's Clever and Hadrian's Wall make them exciting because it's all player driven as opposed to simply dice driven. And this game, I think, is so you have to follow through with this luck. You're obviously going to choose the things that allow you to stay on the board longer, that give you the points, dice, and it's kind of just saying, okay, planning from that first turn, saying, okay, I'm activating this in the second round, this in the third round, and I'm just going to use these mechanisms. And it's kind of an exploration of the mechanisms more than it is actual gameplay and fun, tough decisions. So unfortunately, not one that I really liked. But I've tried 2 boards on this new one. The first board that I tried was the Drifter board, and this one has you playing as this race car driver. And it uses a mechanism similar to what's the game? Is it Formula Day, where you're increasing your speed threshold? And so that one is you're using that bigger dice. In this case, what it does is it gives you a constant modifier to your dice. So every time you roll, based on whatever your speed is, you add that to your roll, which is kind of neat because your 6s can get to 7s, 8s, and 9s based on how high your speed is, but it's capped each round. And once again, this kind of leads into my problem that I was having earlier, where the game kind of dictates what you can do. You can't go past speed 1. You're going to be doing all the speed 1 stuff. And a lot of the time, you know exactly what you need to do, and so there's not really much of a choice when it comes to selecting the speed. So not one that I was super impressed with. Not much to say about here. And then the second one that I've tried is the Gopher Gold, and this unfortunately has the same issue where it only has 2 really big moments in the game, and this is when you're triggering multi-ball, which is actually, I think, the most fun part of the game, but it still falls in line of that choice where you can pick, you'll have 2 balls at the same time, and each dice, you have to use both of them, and I like that decision as opposed to picking the one that's going to be obviously best for you. So it definitely plays into that more beginner-friendly board, and it's not one that is going to you really fall into something that I'm going to pick over other games. So have you played Super Skill Pinball? Is this one that you enjoy? Is this one that you share a similar feeling to?
Yeah, I've got the original one, and of course I played it. I do really enjoy it, and I think it's a great concept and a great idea, and it lends itself quite well the way it plays. But I think your criticism is very fair and quite well articulated when you do kind of have some obvious decisions in it, but there are still those moments where you're like, yes, I can keep going and just exhaust everything. I will say that I think my biggest problem with it, no, in spite of what you said, is the fact it's a bit too long for me. I think I like to house rule it by, I think you can play 3 times through the table. I think twice is more than adequate. I would say 2 balls and then you'd be done. But I think once that third ball comes out, it starts going a bit too long. But I do really like the game. I think it's a great concept. I think it's a great system. But yeah, I think your criticisms are quite apt.
I think that's really funny that your comment is the length of the game, because the whole point of the game is to make it go as long as possible, right?
Yeah.
So it's like feeding into its own negativity. It's kind of frustrating, and so I feel like it's I don't know. It's for me, it's kind of set itself up for failure. So unfortunate. And it looks like Best at Star Trek agrees with me, saying they only played it 4 times and then shelved it afterwards. So unfortunately. And then we've got some other recommendations here. Rather play Fleet the Dice game, Under Falling Skies. Don't even have Under Falling Skies. I'd have to agree with you here. I think those are some great options for solo gaming in particular. So fantastic ideas and I guess just chat about it. But that is Super Skill Pinball 4K. And Dan, what is the last game that you've been playing?
Okay, so the last game I want to talk about is a game called Bruxelles 1897. And this is the card game version of its namesake game called Bruxelles 1893, which sadly is out of print. And I've been after it for a long time and I can't get a copy of it. It's going to get reprinted this year with the expansion. So looking forward to that. But this is 1893, which is the smaller box card game version of it. And this is a worker placement and area control style game where you're going to have this big grid of cards, and this grid is going to consist of these kind of pieces of artwork. It's going to contain like buildings and resources to build those buildings, and even money where you can sell these artifacts. And nobles as well, which will give you kind of unique powers you can use throughout the game to climb these tracks, which can give you points in different ways. And the kind of core mechanism of the game is that you're going to take one of these cards from your hand, which are basically your workers. And these cards are double-sided. One side of the card is going to have a lower denomination of money. One's going to have a higher denomination of money. And depending on which side you put face up, you're going to replace the card that you're going to take, and you're going to pay that amount of money to the bank. And you might think, well, I'm going to get the resource anyway. Why wouldn't I always play the lower amount? And that's because when you play these cards, the complete value of the money that you've put down on the table is going to contribute towards area majorities, towards the columns and those columns are going to give you a bonus at the end here, at the bottom of the column, to give you, again, more abilities to climb up these tracks, and even ability to unlock cards that can get locked up in jail if you go to another part of the kind of table. And that's pretty much how the game plays out. You're going to be collecting resources and again building these buildings, and each time you build a new building, you have to spend more resources. And one other thing as well, I really love it when you build these, when you place these cards down, they start to make these shields. So when you get like a whole section of these workers, you can see all these different player pieces or player colored cards have little shields in the corners of them. And when you have the whole set of 4, then that's another way to score points in terms of majority. So if somebody, say, contributes 3 out of the 4 shields, then they're going to get points based on how far they up on that shield track. So that's a really cool mechanism. And I will say that I think this is a massively unexplored area of board gaming, where when you take worker placement spots, that can contribute to an area control overarching kind of mechanism. I think that's such a cool idea, and I think that's a great part of this game. I did, however, have some issues with it, and I think my biggest issue with it was the way that you construct the buildings. Because, as I said, all you do for your first building, you pick up one of these resource cards, you spend 1 resource to build a building. Second one, you pick up 2 resources, no matter what they are, and build another building. And depending on how many different types of resources you use, you get an extra point. And for me, that felt really like, it felt so clunky, and it felt so like unpolished compared to everything else in the game, and it really did kind of rub me the wrong way, and I didn't like it one bit. But other than that, the rest of it is good. It's a perfectly good game. I very nearly would kind of give this a shield of quality, but it's just under that because of those few problems I have. But it's a good experience. I still think I'm going to prefer the big box version, the main course. But as a kind of an appetizer, a pretty involved game that takes about 45 minutes to an hour to play. This offers quite a lot, especially considering it's in such a tiny little filler-sized box. But that is Brussels 1893. Good
Fantastic.
game, but not great.
So what would push it over that line from good to great? What do you think? What could they add or change, especially with that building system?
I think I would just go back to tried and tested. This building needs this resource, this resource, this resource. If it's harder to build, give you more points for it. That's the way I would do it, rather than just take your choice. But I can see why they're doing it, because one of the tracks is basically going to give you more points depending on how many buildings you build. But I can see what they're doing, but it just didn't feel right for me. It just didn't mesh with the rest of it, and it just didn't feel right. That's my takeaway from it. Maybe it's a personal thing. I don't know if anybody else has that opinion, but that bit just felt rushed and a bit tacked on.
That makes sense. Very fair criticisms. And like you said, it plays into the rest of the game, so it's clear why they decided to go with that decision.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, the last game that I am talking about this time is a family game. I've been on a lot of top lists of 2021, which I think is wild because the game is very pretty and very fun, but had some cool exploration with it. But this is Cascadia. So this is another game that we've been playing a lot. My wife's family really enjoys it, so this is one that we pulled out with them. But this is a great, simple tile drafting game where you're going to be organizing these landscapes in front of you and using these different animals to score in a variety of ways. And I really like this. It has this tiny towns vibe where you're going to be putting pieces around a board, and each of them is going to have a special ability that changes each game. And I really like this system. It offers a lot of variety. But the big thing that I wanted to talk about in this game is something that a lot of people don't know about, is found in the back of the rulebook, and these are the scenarios, or what are called the achievements in the game. And this is essentially little rules tweaks that you make to the game that is going to open it up. And I think that's really, really awesome, because you can play Cascadia already in a bunch of different ways, but these simple rule tweaks are going to change it for the better. Now, not all of these rule tweaks are good or fascinating or interesting. A lot of them are kind of boring, but some of them are gems. And one that I want to talk about in particular is a rule that changes how the landscape tiles work. So all of the landscape tiles in the game have these different, go figure, landscapes, and you're trying to match them normally and trying to get the majority, the biggest landscapes of specific types in the normal game. However, this specific variant means that instead of scoring that way, you now score only if your landscapes are made of 3 regions at least. Exactly 3. And I love this. It makes the game really open up in the tiles that you're taking. You no longer care about just finding a specific tile that's usually going to connect 2 landscapes at the same time. It now becomes a puzzle of piecing in the correct area in tandem with making sure that you are getting specific land types to get those 3-ofs. And once you have 3, it puts new restrictions on you because you don't want to lose those points you gained already. So it adds a new barrier to putting different types. I really like this. It makes your decisions a lot bigger. It has you moving around on your board a lot differently. And it's one that I recommend that you give a try if you own Cascadia. I think it's fantastic. I love little rules changes like this. We saw this in Colorado with the bonus cards, and I think it works really well here. Have you played Cascadia? Have you tried any of these variants, Dan?
I haven't. It's on my list. It's impossible to get hold of in the UK at the moment. Out of
Bummer.
stock everywhere. But I do want it, and I think I'll like it.
Yep, and Best of Star Trek here says that they have never heard of these variant rules. They're in the back of the book here, so you can find them. There's a whole list of them, and you can play a kind of just a variant. I don't even know how to describe it, like a gauntlet of variants, essentially. There's like a campaign with the little check marks on the back, so kind of interesting. Very interesting there. And that's Cascadia. So those are the games that we've been talking about this week. Any more comments or anything else you want to add before we move on to our next section?
No, I don't think so. No, some good games.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our next section here. So this next section is crowdfunding picks. And for the first time in a long time, the unthinkable has happened. Dan, what's happening? What is going on?
It's Mackenzie, it's not as exciting as it sounds, because this is really just to raise some attention that this is going on, because I know a lot of people are after this game for quite a while, and they might not know that it's actually on GameFound at the moment. So my crowdfunding pick is the Palaces of Carrara, which is currently on GameFound. So yeah, this is an older Kramer and Kiesling game, actually. A really good one, actually, one that I've had in my collection before. I'm not backing the new version. I've played it. I don't think I need to play it anymore, but I know a lot of people have always wanted to get their hands on this one. It went out of print, and it was only available in German, I think, for a long, long time. But if you want to get your hands on a really good medium lightweight Euro game called Palaces of Carrara, then now's the time to do it. I think there's just a few days left. I think most of the base game is staying the same, but they've added some new little things. If you want to, add that extra complexity and things, some new, slightly upscaled production and things. But it's a really solid, medium lightweight Euro that I recommend, and I think it's good fun. So if you didn't know this was out there and currently a campaign going on, then be sure to check it out if you wanted to get your hands on a copy.
Yep. So this is definitely one that if you were looking for this, it's kind of a grail game for some people. So
yeah,
excited that it's now available. So awesome. But the big thing that I want to mention this week is Dan has a crowdfunding pick and I don't. I'm not bagging anything right now, and I have no PSAs to give. This is it. This is all you're getting for our crowdfunding pick this week, and that's kind of insane because normally I'm the one who goes crazy on crowdfunding, but this month is extremely dry for me, and I think that's okay because next month is apparently supposed to be crazy. I think in 2 weeks we have Final Girl Season 2, we have Zombicide, Marvel coming out, as well as all sorts of other things. So take some time to recover right now, take some breaks, and then jump into it with our funding frenzy in the near future. So, crazy stuff going on here. All right, but that is the end of our crowdfunding section. Let's take a look at some more comments here. We have talking about Calico and comparing it to Cascadia, saying they like it better. Interesting. Okay, I've heard a lot of mixed reviews saying that people like the openness of Cascadia more, which I think is wild. It looks like we have some, I'm not sure what these are, but maybe bots of some sort talking about strange things. So that's kind of wild. Yeah, but let's keep on going. So our next section here is the news items. So we both picked something that we found interesting and want to share with our viewers. And let's go ahead and dive into it. So Dan, what do you got first for me?
Yeah, mine's a very early really, that the newest board and dice Daniel Icini game has been announced. This is a co-design with Simone Luciani, who I think is probably the best designer in the game today. This is a game called Tiletum. I don't know how you pronounce this one, but I assume this is going to be this year's big Essen release. And there's a little synopsis up saying what the game's about. And as you'd probably expect, the game does have a dice-driven system where you are, I think, drafting dice based on the resources you're getting and also the action you'll take off the back of that. On the main Board Game Geek page, it says that you are taking the role of rich merchants traveling across Europe in the Renaissance era, I think. So, and again, you are using dice to collect resources and to take actions as well. So still very early, but Always love that kind of first inkling of when a big, or when the new T game is coming out. Now it's become a bit of a board game, a board game or tried and trusted thing that happens every year. You can predict when the new T game is going to come out, and up to this date, they've all been fantastic. Well, I haven't tried Tabanousi yet, but all the other ones have been brilliant. So, yeah, just a heads up that Tiletum is coming.
Super excited for this one. I think that it's really funny that they say features a system where dice are used to not only take actions but also gain resources. I'm like, oh, so like every other game. Great, awesome. I mean, it was revolutionary beforehand, but I'm looking for something more clever, like something that you see in Coimbra. So I want to see something like that, where taking the resources is not a painful action, where it is in like Tekenya, where you feel bad when you do it. So I want something that's a bit more interesting and exciting that ties into that. So we'll see what happens here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they're going more complex, less complex. Who knows? Because I think Tabanousi was supposed to be pretty hardcore. Did you play that one? Did you play Tabanousi?
I heard the exact opposite. I heard that Tabanousi was really easy compared to the rest of them. Like, it was a much more simpler game, and that actually turned a lot of people off of it. So not one that I tried, because after hearing this criticism, I was like, interesting. Like, I wonder how this plays out, and it's one that I want to try first before we get it for the library. Yeah, but I am looking forward to giving it a try.
Cool.
Yeah, but we'll see. All right, my news item here is an announcement as well for a new game, and this is an expansion to a game. This is for a really cool Civilization game that I really love. Tiny card game. This is the new expansion for Empires of the North. This is Wrath of the Lighthouse. Right off the bat, really interesting title here, Wrath of the Lighthouse. Not sure exactly what to think about this, but it is primarily a solo-only campaign for the game, and I think that's really cool, because I think the solo mode for Empires of the North is really, really good. But that's exactly what it is. You have I think it's 15 unique solo scenarios that you're going to be playing in order. And I think that's really interesting, because I do think the solo mode is really well done. It has you setting up with this puzzle in front of you, using those action cards, doing your best to play your faction. But I'm curious to see how it's going to work into a campaign. Are you going to have to play the same faction the whole time? Are you going to be able to jump around? Are you going to be upgrading yourself? I'm interested to see what happens. But there's not a lot of things going on here. We know that it's got 55 cards, scenario booklet, 15 scenarios, campaign book, and it's 50 story branches. I'm curious to see what they do here. So excited. I really do like Empires of the North. Have you played Empires of the North? Is that one that you enjoy?
I've not played it. I've only ever heard people who talk about it absolutely gush about it. So I don't even know what the game is. I don't know the mechanisms, but I just hear that it's brilliant.
Gotcha. So Empires of the North is, in my opinion, one of the most clean designs in that space. So it's a reiteration of like 51st State and the regular Imperial Settlers, but it has you taking a deck, and the actions are super simple. You play a card, or you activate a card, or you use a worker to gain resources or get some sort of extra bonus. And I really like the system. It's just a fast, quick-paced game with competition in the form of this market of islands, and I think it's pretty dang solid. So super excited to try this. I think it's going to be great for people who enjoy the game already, and for solo players. So excited to give it a try. And before we continue, let's go ahead and pause for some comments. We've got Tia joining us here from Takaijo. Good morning. Happy New Year. Bit late. Love Super Scope Pinball. And Bruxelles. Been seeing so much of Cascadia everywhere. Need to try it. I think this is going to be a great pick for you, Tia, particularly the solo mode. You can jump into whenever you like. It's got that puzzle lane, and with those achievement systems, it's going to be one that you enjoy going to. So I think you will have a great time with that. So glad to hear that you're enjoying the other games, though. And that brings us to our next section here. We are jumping into card and component appreciation. This is where we talk about specific pieces, or just artwork, whatever, more the aesthetics and the function of a game, and really dive into why we like it. So Dan, what is your card or component appreciation this time?
Okay, so mine is another purely aesthetic, but I suppose you could call it functional piece. This is the Caskets for a game that came out last year called Die of the Dead. So basically, these are just purely cardboard caskets with this kind of Day of the Dead artwork on them. Nice, bright, vibrant pieces. And I do love it. I do love a good component, but I generally turned off when components are so over the top, superfluous, just throwing money away. Whereas in this one, these still look really nice. They're good quality, sturdy components, and they're functional to the game, and they're still just a bit of cardboard. So I do love it when games do this. But these actually, again, have a functional role where they're actually going to be putting dice in them, and you're going to be using them as shakers as well to kind of randomize the pips. So it's a bit like a dice cup, really, and you're using them to conceal information, so that you're actually just putting the lids on, and therefore you can't see what's in that casket anymore. So a really beautiful and functional piece that adds massively to the table presence of the game. It's going to draw people in, and I think that's what good components should be about, rather than just things for the sake of them. So functional, beautiful, again, great table presence, but still affordable. And that's why my pick is these caskets for Die of the Dead.
Wow, the art is lovely. It reminds me of the quality of like the containers from Obsession. They have these like really cool house boxes. So very, very neat. I really like this. And as you said, it's not only functional, but also really pretty. I love this style.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Great pick. All right. And up next, I have the game Telestrations. Now, if you are familiar with the game Telestrations, you probably already know what I'm talking about here. These are the player booklets. So in Telestrations, the game is actually a rendition of a game called Eat Poop My Cat, where you just take a piece of paper and you pass it around a table and you fold it a couple of times. But Telestration takes it up a notch, and they add these player booklets to it. Now, I don't know if I can show them the best way here, because once you have them in your hands, you have this physical component. They're like, oh, I see. But Telestrations here essentially features these little booklets that all have guides as well as spaces that you're going to be writing in, drawing in, guessing in, and then passing to the other players. And once that book gets the entire way around to you, it is essentially a story in a book that you are going to get to retell as you flip through these pages. So they're spiral bound, they're extremely high quality, all dry erase, and they just work so well. You're going to have a guide on the top here that gives you some reminders, as well as large, big spaces to draw in, and it does fit in your hand really well. And it's just the complete package. I love this style, and I love that it really facilitates this drawing game as you move from page to page at the end and try to tell the story based on these images. I really like this system, and I would love to see this incorporated in more games, particularly that have to do with writing. I think it's just such a well-done package. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I see these booklets, it just brings back so many fond memories, just like laugh out loud moments when you're crying with laughter. So yeah, nothing but good emotions associated to these books. So yeah, great component. And as you said, a flip booklet, just going through the story and just laughing as you're explaining, it's just brilliant. Yeah, couldn't be better.
And that reveal is so good at the end, right? As you turn the pages, because even you don't know what's coming up, and
Yeah.
leads to those moments you were describing. Amazing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So that's our card and component appreciation. Now we have a couple more comments here. Tia says that she loves the theme and artwork for Die of the Dead. Needs to try that one too. Well, that's the issue with these board game shows, right? Is you're going to see all these games that you just can't help but want to try. Happy New Year, Tia, and say hi to Duke for us as well. Awesome. Let's go ahead and jump into our next section. This is our This or That section. This is when we talk to our community with a question of some sort and see what everybody's opinion on it is. And this week in particular, we have our question, which is Terra Mystica or Gaia Project. So that was our last week's poll. Let's go ahead and see the results here. Before we look at it, what do you think it's going to fall into? Is it going to be more towards Gaia Project or more towards Terra Mystica, Dan?
So obviously I know the results, and I think last week, last episode, I think I said that it would be close, but I thought Gaia Project would win because it seems to me more often than not people are falling into that camp. But that was the case by the look of it.
That definitely was the case. So, and as you said, it was pretty marginal. I think that people that play Terra Mystica really like it, but I think that people who play both can appreciate the changes of Gaia Project and really see how it really does change the game drastically. And that's kind of the camp that I fall in. It's one that I recognize how it goes. Best at Star Trek says almost neither, but picks Terra Mystica if they had to pick. So I'm sorry that you didn't love either. I think that these games are absolutely fantastic. But it seems like the consensus here is that Gaia Project is the way to go. We have some comments as well that I thought were really fascinating this time. So a lot of people like the theme of Gaia Project, and that was pushing them over. But then we also had some people, LA Katos here, saying that they thought that the base game of Gaia Project was better, but the new Merchants expansion made the original Terra Mystica better, which I think is super exciting because we have that expansion, but it's not one that we've actually got dive into. So I'm excited to give that one a try because that's really exciting to hear that. So I'm super excited for that. Any other thoughts on this, Dan?
Well, I've got that expansion on my shelf over there. So as I said, it's just excited me a bit more to get it out and try it.
Exactly. I think that'll be for sure one that I prioritize during our next gaming session. So super excited. That's super, super cool. All right.
Cool. So what's
Any
the
other
next
thoughts?
question?
All right,
no.
let's move on. Now you're all good. So we are moving on to our next question here. This is a very different question here. This one in particular is about game nights themselves. And the question here is food at the game table or no food at the game table? So one that has very little to do with gameplay, but everything to do with the experience. So for initial impressions, Dan, what do you think?
Well, as always, most of these questions are the answer is it depends, because if it's got clean food that you can just in and out your mouth without any greasy crap on your fingers, then yeah, fair play. But if I had to choose one or the other, then it would be no.
I think that I'm very much in your camp as well. In our gaming space, I have like a little snack bar that has things that are easy to consume, like the little bags of chips, and you just kind of pour them out. Or you'll have everything it's not going to leave anything nasty on your fingers. It was really funny. We actually did. I was trying out all the streaming software and stuff, and the first thing that I tried out was a tier list ranking all the different snacks and like how appropriate they are for game night. So it happened. That was like a while ago, a couple months ago, but I thought that was a really fun one to do. But what do you think is the best food to eat at the game table, and what do you think is the worst food to eat at the game table?
I suppose worst food is going to be something like cheese dust on your fingers with chips or crisps.
I
Stuff
see
like
your cheese dust, and I raise you anything with honey in it.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Oh my gosh, could you imagine?
Yeah. That's just no. That would give me a heart attack, I think, at the table. Yeah.
And then best snack at the table.
I suppose like hard sweets. Unwrap it in your mouth, no problem.
That makes sense. Something like Jolly Ranchers or anything in that range. It looks like our comments already are pouring in here. We have some people saying, no, don't spill food on my game. Food, always food. Twizzlers, honey, twist pretzels are OP. I think that's a great suggestion because there's like no dust or anything. I think that M&Ms are also really good choices. They've got that hard outer shell, so it keeps everything super nice. And then here's a good one. Problem is dealing with cats. Sounds good, but we play after dinner. Okay. And then Cheetos are terrible, terrible snacks. So I think that there's definitely some positives and negatives here. I think, like you said, it's going to depend. But you would say no if that would be your straight out guess. No food at the game table.
Yeah, not even close. Yeah.
Interesting. I say yes. I think that making sure that people have something to nibble on is important. It's going to usually make it so that they have something to eat while you're explaining the rules, and I think that's nice because they're not they're waiting till the end of the explanation to ask questions, and I like that. And they're also not going to be there you go. And then they're also not going to be grumpy because they're not thinking about something else. And so I think if you're putting up a barrier to gaming, I think that's not necessarily a good thing. Say, hey, if you're working to play, we're not going to eat. So I think that making people feel invited and feeling comfortable is my priority usually.
Okay, cool. Well, what do you think the answer will be? What do you think the answer will be from viewers?
Our audiences? Oh man, I think it will probably be no. I think people will. I think people will probably be like, "Hey, these games are pretty valuable. Get out of here." But yeah. I'm kind of with Tia here. If your friends spill on your game, keep the food. Get better friends. I think having a space to put the food is also pretty important. We have like these large. I think they're actually they hold quilts, so they're like hampers almost, and we kind of put our drinks or things that could be spilled on that. So it's kind of nice to have them away from the gaming area. So having like a dedicated space is a pretty big one. And
yeah,
then
that's a good idea.
another little little recommendation from Best of Star Trek says a great idea to keep them occupied during rules explanation is genius. That's a teaching tactic right there, making sure that the kids have something to do so they are focused. So pretty funny. All right, and that is this or that. Is there going to be food on the game table or no food? Amazing. All right, our next section here is back to games. We're talking about mechanism appreciation. This is where we do dive into specifics in games and what are things that we really like about it. What stands out as a fantastic mechanism? And Dan, what is your first mechanism here we're talking about?
Okay, so yeah, the mechanism I want to talk about, I think, is unique to Alexander Pfister games, and
Mm.
I know there's not just one that uses it, because I know Mombasa uses it, and also Blackout Hong Kong uses it. This is the idea of when you play cards, the cards will go into multiple discard piles. So therefore, as the game goes on, you're going to start filtering them out, and there you can, and as a choice, you can only take one of those piles back. So you can't just keep spamming the same cards together because you're not going to have the ability to do that. And I think that is such a genius mechanism. When I first saw it with Mombasa, I was like, well, this is clever, because I want to play all these cards together to make a super turn. But if I do that, I'm going to dilute my deck down massively, and I'm not going to be able to do it again anytime soon. And that's so brilliant. And yeah, I'd never seen any other designer use it or utilize that system. And I think if they did, they'd automatically think, oh, that was Alexander Pfister's mechanism. I could be wrong, but I've not seen it in anything else, and I think it just works brilliantly, to
So
be honest.
So I have not played Mombasa, but I have played Blackout. And I really like how in Blackout, in addition to getting those specific actions back, you're also discarding cards to fulfill specific objectives. Does that
Yes.
show up here in Mombasa as well?
It doesn't, no, but that was what I was going to say next. Yeah, that's kind of taking it to the next level, and saying, yeah, there's even objectives that say if you have a red card, a blue card, or something else on this particular pile, then you'll get an objective complete. Brilliant. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I think it's a great mechanism. Now, is this would you say that this concept of this recurring back your discard pile, do you think that Thaum's discard pile has any inspiration from this? Or is it specifically those multiple discard piles that really sets this apart?
I think it's the multiple, the diluting your deck down that I think's the unique thing. Whereas, obviously, in fact, generally as a rule, I love it when games play around with kind of things that you would presume are going to work a certain way. Like again, new mechanisms involving discard piles, brilliant. You know, games like Arboretum use it brilliantly, where you can draft other people's discard piles. So, what's something that would be normally like a mute point, really, something that wouldn't take any consideration, just go through the motions, that all of a sudden becomes an important decision and adds that extra layer of detail to a game. And I think again, this filtering system works brilliantly, and I love any games that play around with that.
I love how you mentioned that. Like the discard pile should be something that should be used. Going back
Yeah.
to my days playing Yu-Gi-Oh, there were actually a lot of decks that I really enjoyed where you basically have two hands of cards, where you have one hand that you're actually playing stuff out of, but the second one is that discard pile, which is another bank of resources. And I think that's so fantastic. And you
Mm.
see that in games like Arkham Horror, the card game, Marvel Champions, these card play games, where having these multiple things to think about is super awesome. I really enjoy that. I love that system. And I totally agree with you. I want to see this in more games because it just
Mm.
gives you more options. So super exciting. Yeah, love this. Fantastic choice on mechanism here, Dan, with
Thank you.
Mombasa's discard piles. All right, my game is going to be Corrosion. Now, Corrosion is one we talked about last time on your channel here, so I'm not going to dive too deep into the mechanisms here. But in Corrosion, there is this really fascinating mechanism that I really enjoy, and this has to do with one of the resources in the game, and this is the steam. So in this game, you have a kind of a small power wheel that you'd see in something like Terra or Gaia Project, and this is known as the steam. And what you can use steam for is a lot of machines will require it. You can also use it to refresh the markets in the game. But the big use of it, and one that you may not see the huge importance of it at the beginning, is spending the steam in order to speed up your engine. So this is a literal engine building game where you are going to be doing your best to buy these different machines, turn your wheels, and get all sorts of these little bonuses as you play. But the big thing here is sometimes you're not going to want to turn your wheel because it may ruin what you're doing or it may put you off your strategy. And so there's this really cool mechanism in the game where you can actually take a break from what you're doing and as a free action, pay 1 steam to force one of the pieces in your engine to move 1 space forward. And I really like that mechanism here. And it's really cool because it has a lot of different consequences. So whenever one of your machines gets to this X on your board, that machine usually is going to break. It's done working. So by pushing your machines closer to the X, you're essentially rushing them. They're going to break sooner. However, you get whatever you're trying to get that much sooner. And I really like that decision here because maybe getting that resource is very critical to what you're doing, or maybe getting a card back because you can push the cards as well back to your hand and reuse in an action is also extremely critical. I really like this system here, and I think it just puts in a lot of interesting choices because there's so much you can do with it. There are also these one-shot machines that you have to wait till they get all the way around. So in the later parts of the game, getting them is not so beneficial because you're not even sure if they're going to get there to be able to activate. So having that option to push them forward, I think is genius. I think this is really well done, and I think it's one of my favorite mechanisms in this game. So that is spending the steam for speeding up your engine in Corrosion. Any thoughts on this one? Have you dived into this one yet, Dan? I know you just recently got a copy of it.
Yeah, I literally got a copy the other day. I read the rule book last night, ready to play my first game, and that was one of the things that stood out for me was how you could again speed those things up, get it done quicker. So yeah, it's just a matter of time. I'll share my thoughts probably in the next episode.
Excellent. So I'm excited to hear what you think about this game. I think there's a lot of cool mechanisms, but I think this one really does stand out as being so simple, but making a huge impact in the gameplay. So that's Corrosion, and that's spending the steam for speeding up the engine. And that brings us to our next section here. This is the one that we're always excited to jump into. This is the random game. Predictions, thoughts, Dan?
Let's go for a kids game. There we go.
Kids game. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. I am going to go with a game that is at least 50 years old.
Oh, good.
All right. Here we go. Random game time. All right. The game's name is A Game of Tollgate. 1894, got him. So this is at least 50 years old, more than 100 years old. A Game of Tollgate is a variation of games such as Parcheesi. Okay. Goal is to move the pawns around to the home section, controlled by dice. Players are moved on the same board, capture pawns. There are 4 dice, 2 shakers made out of wood. So this is A Game of Tollgate. Have you played Parcheesi? Are you familiar with Parcheesi?
Yeah, I've seen this. I don't think we call it that. I think we call it something else in the UK. I can't think what though.
What's it called? Any idea? Can't remember?
No, I can't remember. I will know. I just good.
Yeah, I'm fine. Oh man, sorry, I just kind of zoned out there for a second. But for some reason, I think we talked about this before. I feel like Parcheesi is a game that shows up on Random Game a lot, like a variation of Parcheesi. I'm surprised that things like Monopoly haven't shown up on here yet. Like all the variations of that. Like I feel like that's a lot of the pie for Random Games.
That's a good point.
It's just random remakes of like classic games. So we haven't seen a lot of Uno clones. We haven't seen a lot of Monopoly clones. Why is it Parcheesi?
I don't know, but Parcheesi dates back to the year 400.
I guess this is like one of those ancient games like Mancala or Go that's been around since the dawn of time. And Roll to Move is the mechanic that just won't quit. So that is A Game of Tollgate. That's our random game. Any interest in seeking this one out or giving it a try?
No, not for me, this one.
And it looks like Best at Star Trek also has never played Parcheesi. So unfortunately, you got to give this one a try. If you could find a copy of Game of Tollgate, I'm not going to say that I'm going to try to have a meetup and get this game played, but I mean, I'd be down for it if you want to give Game of Tollgate a try. Fantastic. And then back a callback for our snack section here. Best of Star Trek's wife said, "What game are they talking about with the food when you were talking about snacks?" So what game in particular are you wanting to make sure they keep food away from? What's like your biggest no-no game?
Well, I suppose value. So maybe like my Rococo Deluxe or something. Yeah, I wouldn't be happy if I got some grease or something on that board. I'll be pretty upset.
Oh my goodness.
I had quite a funny story actually when I first got the deluxe edition of Gugong. So it was a really beautiful game, and I had it on the table. and I think one of my friends poured like a really fizzy drink over the board, and it nearly frothed up over the sides and onto the board. That was, and I was very panicky, and I still get the mick taken out of me because of that.
Oh my goodness. So that was it. That was the spark that ignited your hate towards all things culinary. I
Yeah.
see it. Amazing. Okay, so that brings us to our next section here. This is, I think, one of the most interesting sections that we do on this show. And this is the why is this in your collection? So this is where we bring out a specific game and we say, hey, why is this in your collection? So here is our list. Let me quickly pull up your game, Dan. My question to you. Let me find it really quick. Any other things you wanna mention or talk about before we dive into this?
I don't know. Just trying to fill up some time. I don't know. No, just hit. Is it positive or negative?
This one is going to be just a question because I'm
Okay.
always curious when it comes to your games because a lot of the times you have games that are rated so drastically, like in one way or the other, and I'm just so curious, like what is the reason that you keep this? And so that's what I want to know is why
Okay.
you still have this one. Let me see if I
All
can
right.
find it. I don't know why it's not showing up. Aha! I found it. Okay. So my game for you is called Chiseled. I want to know why you owe this one.
Okay. So this isn't my game personally, but again, I share my
Classic.
collection with my brother. This is it's actually quite an interesting game, and I suppose I would still happily play this one. I don't think it's a fantastic game. I think I raised it about 5, maybe. Is that right?
I think so, something like that.
Yeah. So this actually uses the deck deconstruction mechanism, where you
Okay.
start with a bunch of cards, and as the game goes on, you're taking actions to shed cards, which are essentially going to be shedding negative points or building towards a certain amount of cards in certain sets to get more points. I think maybe one of the reasons this has stuck around is because it is unique. I got nothing else like it in my collection, and it's not. I suppose it's not fighting for the same space as anything else is. That's probably, in fact, that's probably a big reason why a lot of the lower rated games do stay around in the collection, is because it's not competing with anything. Even I've culled games that are 8, I rate 8 out of 10 because it's so similar to something I might rate 8.5 out of 10. So I'm looking for variety as much as I am looking for great games. So again, I don't think it's a fantastic game. I think it's an okay game. It's pretty random. I don't quite like the action selection mechanism where kind of every round you're picking from one of the available actions in the center, which might let you cycle through your deck or get rid of the top cards and stuff. It feels very random, and sometimes you're left when it's your turn and you have no option but to take the one bad option available. That for me feels a bit frustrating at times. It doesn't feel quite polished, but it's a good effort to use that deck deconstructing system, but I still think there is a ton of kind of untraveled ground when it comes to using that mechanism to the best it can be. But that's all I can say, really. It's unique. That's the answer, I suppose.
So if any game comes in with a card shedding mechanism, it's going to immediately replace this, I assume.
Well, if there's one that's better, then yeah, I suppose it would.
So
It
I
could
heard
be
that
this one.
there's Abandon All Artichokes has a similar mechanism, I hear, a deck wrecking game where you start with a bunch of crappy cards and your goal is to try to
Yeah.
shed them to each other. So have you given that one a try? Is that one you're looking at? I know it just got reprinted.
I've not tried that one. No, I don't really know much about it, but I've heard it's okay. Maybe comparable to it. So I don't know. But it's not my game. But I'd happily play it.
Gotcha. Excellent. So that is my game is Chiseled. Why do you have that in your collection? All right. What do you got for me, Dan?
So mine is a positive one. It's a game that you rate a 9 out of 10.
Okay.
One that's on my kind of outer radar. One that's not on kind of my immediate games to pick up, but one that I hear people really like. And I suppose my concerns about the game is, and a lot with the designer actually. So the designer is David Turtsey, and I know sometimes his games feel a little bit overwrought. I think I don't know if you agree with that. Sometimes I feel like there's some
I'd agree with that.
That could happen. So this is his biggest game, and probably his most successful game. Anachrony. So Anachrony, I know people who like this game really love this game. Big grand production, cool kind of time traveling theme that goes on as well. Is the game as good as the great Euros out there? Obviously, by your rating, it sounds like it is, but why is that?
So Anachrony is fantastic. I literally just put out a video, I think maybe like a week or two ago, about like the 5 reasons I love Anachrony, because I do
Okay.
think it is a standout game. And so I'll just kind of reiterate some of those reasons here, but I do think this game is that good. So the things that
Okay.
really make it stand out is, first off, its thematic ties. I think that it takes all of these complicated mechanisms and pushes them to you in a presentable way and digestible way through the use of the theme. So time travel is a loan system. The action spaces, the multiple different action spaces, are all based on managing your own kind of crew in your home base and send them out on adventures out on the outer planet. And so there's barriers and things that you need to know to access those different areas, but it all makes sense thematically. In addition, this has really cool specific workers that get special abilities based on where they go. And once again, those are thematically tied. Engineers are going to be good at building stuff. Scientists are going to be good at researching. Scientists are going to have ways to distill water extra ways. Administrators are going to be efficient when it comes to specific actions. And I think it all really flows well. So the thematics, first off, incredible in this game. The next thing that I really enjoy is the flow of the game. I really like games where on your turn you're doing one thing, but there's so many things that happen, and it's all about timing. So it's the reasons I like games like Blood Rage and Keyflower, where on your turn you get one thing, but man, it's critical what you do on that one thing, because you are giving up so much by taking one specific action. The other cool thing is the teeter-totter of taking actions on your own personal board as well as taking actions on the main game board, because the personal board is going to give you some recurring actions that you can consistently use, and you can say, okay, yeah, I know that I can get free resources if I do this, but by doing that, you're giving up the ability to do these, perishable actions out in the center of the board. And I think that's really, really good tense decision making, because you have to prioritize every single action, and everything you do is super critical. So I love the tenseness, but I love how much is stuffed into a game that is so thematic and so well thought out. So I think that this game just really shines in putting in all these really fun and exciting mechanisms into a great package with a great theme, lots of customization. And I love the way that the game sets you up right from the beginning with individual player goals that are your evacuation conditions. And that is going to have you have some clear objectives right from the get go to help you navigate through all of these complicated systems. So there's a lot to love with Anachrony, and that's just the base game. But all of the expansion content is also really fantastic. The new Fractures of Time introduces some really cool blinking mechanisms, one that I'm having an absolute blast with, and one that consistently gets played despite how heavy it is. Amazing game. I think Anachrony is definitely worth your time if you can get a copy of it.
Okay. Yeah, very, very interesting. And when you say despite how heavy it is it heavy in terms of rules convolution, or is it the weight of the decisions? Because I see on Board Game Geek it's weighted 4
Mhm.
out of 5, and that for me makes me a little bit apprehensive.
The heaviness in the amount of options. There is so much you can do, but like I said before, because of the thematics, everything is pretty clear. Like the
Okay.
round phase is so well laid out, the actions make sense, but there's just so many new things that can come up. It's very similar to an engine building game that uses cards, but in this case, you're using tiles. You're picking up lots of different things for your own personal buildings, but there's just a lot to explore. But I think that's what's so clever about the objective system is it gives you a path that you can take and allows you to branch out from that, as opposed to something like Caverna, where it's like, hey, here's 10 million options, you have to pick one right now. This one gives you one and allows you to kind of pick things as you
Mhm.
go to fit that specific objective. So I really like that. I think it's really well done. But
Okay.
yeah, Anachrony I think is worth your time if you have any interest in it. Right now, you can get it on the Voidfall backer kit if that's something you're interested in. A friend of
Mm.
mine, Jenna, she loves Anachrony, and this is her chance now to go ahead and go all in and get the whole thing. So really, really great game.
Yeah, I mean, I want to try it. I definitely want to try it. It's whether I want to try it before I buy it. And I think you've sold me on probably wanting to buy it, because games like this have potential to be up there with my favorites. But Terzi has always been one way or the other for me. I always either
Hmm.
loved them or being like, it's good, but it's not great. That's my general consensus really. But this one obviously is biggest hit, and probably rightly so by the sounds of it.
I'm very much with you. For example, I know that you love this game, but Tawatinsuyu was the opposite direction for me, where the gameplay was not satisfying, but still had that plethora of options.
Yeah.
And the options were a bit more nonsensical, in my opinion, of
Okay.
just having this spreadsheet to choose from. But yeah, it's fantastic. I think Anachrony is extremely, extremely good. Now,
Okay,
really
cool.
quick, let's go ahead and bring up some comments here. We have Emily joining us a little late into the show, but so excited that you're unboxing Townsfolk Tussle. Super cool. Have a blast with it. It's great. It's on the table right now. I'm about to jump into a final fight with the frog boss. So super, super cool. Best of Star Trek says a pan in all artichokes is a fun game. Happy New Year, Emily. Thank you so much for being here today.
Happy New Year.
And then we also have Barker saying, haven't played Anachrony yet, but sounds fun. Thank you for joining us. Happy New Year, Barker. And loves Chicarian by the same publisher. I think that Mind Clash Games just has a lot of fantastic ideas and concepts, and I'm just excited to explore more. Voidfall looks fantastic. I can't wait to jump into these. I think that just sounds fantastic. I'm ready. I'm ready for this. I'm ready for it. Whew. Any games that you're looking forward to trying besides Anachrony from Mind Clash Games?
Do you know what? Nothing comes to mind, but I played well, I played Tricarian many years ago, and at the time I thought it was good, but I was a little bit overwhelmed because there's a lot going on. You know, gears within gears within gears. I would be interested to try it again. See if see if with a fresh mind, more experience, see how that goes. But yeah, I think that would be my answer to give Tricarian another go.
Gotcha. Sounds good. I love the theming in Tricarian. I mean, if anybody can make magicians, like stage magicians, sound fantastic, I think that production and that quality, it really speaks to it. So I really want to give Tricarian a try. All right, that brings us to our next section here. This is A to Z. So where we go through the alphabet, talk about a light game and a heavy game from each letter in the alphabet. So first off, Dan, start us off with our P games.
Okay,
our games for the letter P.
Yeah, so my lighter of the two is a game. Actually, I went for a bit more obscure choice this time rather than the obvious, because I was going to pick Palaces of Carrara, but I talked about it in the Kickstarter section. So anyway, my lighter game is a game called Pyramids. And Pyramids is a very simple kind of drafting pyramid building game, really, where you're kind of placing these cards, and these cards have different kind of layouts of these different brick types, and you're trying to chain them together as you build these pyramids. But this game had a really cool mechanism that I love, where you would draft at this roll, and that would determine your initiative to draft the cards that you're going to get to play with that round. However, if you drafted earlier, as in getting the, say, number 1 initiative card, then you'd only get to ever build your pyramid. But if you drafted the 2, or I think it's maybe the 2 or 3, then you'd get to add to your pyramid, and you'd get to add to your obelisk, which is the the column. And if you get the really worst or the worst initiative, then you get to add to all 3, which is your pyramid, your obelisk, and your crypt. So I love that idea of, are you going to go first and get the exact cards that you want, but only be able to do a specific thing? Or are you going to, be I'll take what I can take, but I get to do everything. And I think that's a really great mechanism, and it worked really well for this very small, compact little, card-based game. Again, that got that puzzly thing where you're trying to connect all these brick types together. You're getting loads of points that way. Just a very simple set collection, again, puzzly style game with some pretty cool concepts. And this was actually a game I picked up completely based on a hunch, really. I was in a game shop, never heard of it, and it was surprisingly good fun. So if you haven't, if you're not aware of this game, and you want a nice simple filler game, this is one to at least take a look at.
I really like this. I like how you have this this barrier, these restrictions put on you through that pyramid structure. It reminds me a lot of Conspiracy, the Abyss game, where you are having to build in specific areas, so you have to be very careful in the way you're building. So I think this is really neat. Great suggestion here. That's Pyramids from Dan. All right. My small game here, my lighter game, is actually going to a very small card drafting game. This is a game that is played over 4 ages, and very, very neat in the way that the aging actually works. This is Paper Tales. So Paper Tales is a very cute little design, and I think that it works really well in what it's performing, where you are drafting these cards and paying their costs, playing them out in front of you, and you can have a kingdom of 4 different characters at a time. And at the end of every round, you'll compare strength and fight your neighbors, as well as be able to upgrade your city using the resources you've provided. And then at the end of every round, you have to age your characters. If they have an age token on them already, they die. it's too late. I think the age tokens represent something like 50 years, but then if they don't have one, they get an age token placed on them. And I really like this mechanism. It encourages you to invest in specific cards at specific times, but it also, you have to keep that in mind, that say, hey, I know that these cards are not going to be around forever. And I think that's a really cool idea here. The cards are fun, they're very interesting, and I like how you can, when you do draft based on the player count, you may see these cards again and again, and you can draft your strategy around this. This is very similar to things like Seven Wonders, where you are just worried about those people around you, but you are also anticipating what other players around the table may be getting based on specific things. And I really like this system. The artwork is cute, as I mentioned before, and I think the expansion adds a lot of new interesting cards as well as a solo mode, and I think that makes for really interesting gameplay. I like the city that you're building in front of you, and when you do get that expansion, it's going to change the buildings that you can build each time, which I think really does open up the game. So very neat drafting game. This is Paper Tales, one that I do recommend you try. It was a hit for us in the Gen Con that we got it at. I think this was like 4 or 3 years ago, and it's one that really did stand out as one that we kept on coming back to. So great little game. That is Paper Tales. Have you played this one, Dan?
No, I haven't actually, but it's interesting to see that this one's kind of stood up for you, because I know a few years ago there was that massive influx of drafting games. There was like just everything was a drafting game, and this one sounds like it's weathered the storm a bit, and people still like it. So that's normally a sign of quality.
And it looks like Barker agrees with us. Paper Tales is fantastic. And really quick, going back to our talk on Mind Clash games, Emily wants to know, have you played Cerebria? Have you played Cerebria, Dan?
I have not. No, I haven't.
Not played Cerebria. Me either. When I saw Cerebria on, I think it was on Kickstarter, when I saw it there initially, I thought to myself, is this ever going to get played? Because the gameplay requirements were a little complicated. You either had to have 2 teams of 2 or a 1v1. But okay. There you go. All right. Up next, we have our heavier games. What do you got for me, Dan? What is your P for this time?
Okay, so another, kind of a hidden gem. It's not the best game. It has its problems, but one that I think deserves a bit of a spotlight. This is a game called Papua. So Papua is by Devere Games, who seem to be kind of on a bit of a roll at the moment, bringing out some big hits. This one is a dice-driven worker placement game. As at the start of the game, you're going to be rolling a bunch of dice, and then you are going to be claiming a certain action spot and locking in the action spot to a certain pip value on those dice. So I love the way that each round, every different worker placement spot is assigned to a different pip value. And if you're the first player, then that can really benefit you, because you get to kind of determine what all the different areas are. But then after that, if the other players aren't rolling the particular numbers that they want, and you have got some tools to kind of mitigate this, then they're going to be, out of luck, really, and not going to have to be able to use the spots they want to use. And this is a bit of a kitchen sink game, really, and it might not look like it from the artwork, but there's this little set collection mechanism here in the bottom left-hand corner, where you are collecting these animal cards, and you're doing that through a blind bidding system, which works quite well. You have this really cool tension where everything you do in this game ends up costing energy, and that's basically your timer for the game. And every action you take or every meeple you spend is going to keep going down and down and down this track. And when you get past certain threshold points, you're going to start having to pay or kind of feed your workers, I suppose. But it's a really cool idea that I haven't seen before. When you're changing those worker placement spots, depending on the dice you've rolled, you can get more workers as the game goes on, and lots of things like that. So a nice little well-rounded game. Again, it does have some problems. The rulebook isn't the best. There's some kind of, some things aren't very clear, but the game itself is decent, and it's pretty affordable as well. At least if you live in the UK, you can get it for less than £10.
Oh, wow.
That's Papua.
Very cool. I really like this theming. I actually used to teach Pacific Island history, and so I did a lot of different studies on different people in the Pacific Islands. And this is so neat. I really like this theming. And as you described, this does not look like it would have that kitchen sink, but it's got a lot of cool mechanisms interwoven. What would be your favorite part of this game, you think?
I actually really like I like the blind bidding system. I think it's cool, because you're actually bidding them with your meeples, and if you don't win the bid, I think you lose them anyway, or lose half of them. So there is this real kind of idea of having to constantly get new people in, but balancing your whole workforce to do things, but keep them coming in. It's got a cool kind of flow of resources. Good game, but one that nobody really talks about.
Hence why it's only £10 in the UK, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right, so up next we have my heavier game, and this is one that gets a lot of play, and this is one of my brother's favorite games, I think. This is Pax Pamir Second Edition. Now, this is a wonderful revised edition that implements the Pax system of market row cards, where on your turn you have two simple actions. You either buy a card from a market or you play one of the cards that you already have in your hand. And I love this system. And the cool thing about this is the way that the cards work. And it's my favorite part about this game for sure. So each card has what are known as impact icons. So every time they're played, you run down the line of your cards and you do all the things. And based on where the card is, that's going to affect where these pieces appear on the board and the different effects that it's going to have. And this game also employs this really cool nation system where there are 3 battling nations on the map at a time. So they're the Russians, the British, as well as the native Afghanis. And whenever you play a card based on who you are currently aligned with, that's the soldiers or the roads that are going to come out. And I think that's really fascinating because everybody can be part of that same coalition. You can be all Russian if you really want, or at any point you can play a card that may be a patriot of a specific faction and then immediately switch alliances. This is a game of piggybacking, but also understanding when and where to change those specific alliances. I really like this. It reminds me of something like Maracaibo, where you have all of these entities just existing, and it's up to you how you want to interact with them. And I think that's really, really fascinating and really fantastic. So I really like this here. The game itself is also just absolutely stunning. I love how straightforward and simple the gameplay is, how much history is rooted into the design, and I just love how it works. I love the story that unfolds, the emergent storytelling of the game with the different characters, and I just really enjoy this tense gameplay of clever card play. So fantastic game in my opinion, and one that I think all players should try. Great game, Pax Pamir Second Edition.
Okay, cool. Just looking at those cards there, Mackenzie.
Yes.
Was that all flavor text or was that actual rules text? Because
it's all flavor text, which I think is
okay.
amazing because the card itself, let's look at one here. So these are what the cards look like. All you need to know on a card is literally those impact icons in that upper right. So this is the main portion of the card. You also have these actions that you can activate as a bonus action on your turn. But the big thing here is there's so much history to each card. And if you want to, you can read them, but you can totally ignore them. And I love that. I love how easy it is to digest the contents of the cards and really understand what they do with a quick glance. And I think that's the biggest strength of this game, is how accessible it is once you know the language of the game. So it's really, really, really well done, in my opinion. But yes, all flavor text. Don't mean to scare you off. Yeah, you're all good.
Yeah, to be honest, that was one of the things that really put me off looking at this, because whenever I saw pictures of it, I saw that much text, and that for me, kind of nowadays, is a massive turn off for me. I hate it when cards have text all over them.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Cool.
I love it when it's optional. Flavor text is actually one of my favorite things in a game. I love when cards just go over the top of telling their own unique stories. And I think it's fantastic. I love flavor text in games.
Great.
Sweet.
Heard it's good. Not played it, but
oh, it's amazing. You
it.
got to give this one a try. All right, and that is everything. Those are our sections here. That's the final of our A to Z. Next week we'll be back with Q. So have fun with that. Trying to find games that start with Q. Quickly, let's look at the comments. We have some people giving up their Ps. So we have Barker saying that Parade is a great light game, and we both are big fans of Parade here.
Yeah. I didn't want to talk about it anymore because I think I've bored everybody talking about Parade so much. Yeah.
Absolutely. Emily says that Post Explosion for light, Paladin's West Kingdom for medium heavy. I really like Paladin, especially that new expansion. Burke also says Pictomania for light game. And then Emily says, I'd say Parks, but Potion Explosion is way better. Have you played Potion Explosion? It's one that I've always seen, but just never had the chance to actually play yet.
No, never played it.
Yeah, looks like the Candy Crush concept of trying to match the cubes. I didn't really like that in Chai. I felt that it really bogged down the gameplay because everybody was trying to get the perfect play and line up things, and not something that I really enjoyed. But I'm curious to see. Emily says it's good, so we'll see what we see. We'll see. And then Bruno says, "Always miss your live cast. Glad we caught it. Great to have you here. Happy New Year, Bruno. Great to have you joining us on the show today." And then Emily says that she is intimidated by Pax Pamir, but got it through the Kickstarter. I think that you'll have a great time with it. The solo is really well done, and the multiplayer is absolutely fantastic, especially with the shifting alliances, just how clean this system is. Get it through one play, and this will be a game you consistently come back to. And then we have Jonathan with another heavy game, Pendragon, The Fall of Roman Britain. Favorite coin game so far. Thank you for the suggestion, Jonathan. Do you play coin games, Dan?
I don't think I've ever played any of them, no.
Never. Me either. I don't think so. Maybe I have. I don't know. I have a friend, Dan, that lives here that's very much into these style of games. He's constantly giving me exposure to war games and coin games. So maybe I have. I just don't know which one I've played. So
Yeah,
who knows?
I'm not even sure quite. I've heard it a million times. I'm not quite sure what it exactly means. So
Counterinsurgents.
Yeah, but I don't know what that means,
gameplay wise or
Gameplay
mechanic
wise,
wise.
yeah.
So Jonathan, if you could illuminate us in the comments, that'd be fantastic on what a coin game's features are. That'd be fantastic. But those are all of the big sections we had to talk about today. Dan, what are you looking forward to in the near future for games?
Okay, yeah, so I've got some exciting games to play. We mentioned Corrosion. Got Corrosion on my table at the moment. Just punched everything, so hopefully get that one played sooner rather than later. Also got Watch. So Watch is a new game that's kind of flown under the radar so far. 2021 game with quite an interesting theme where you were like working in this watch factory, but secretly smuggling stuff in and stuff. Quite interesting idea with this rondel system. And finally managed to get a copy of Hadrian's Wall as well. So hopefully get that one played soon.
Fantastic. It's going to suck you in, man. The Hadrian's Wall is going to be a game that you just always want to pull out. It's going to happen. For me, myself, we got the expansion for Tekenuin, and that's exciting. So going to try that out. It adds an entire new action to the game, which is crazy because that's huge. It adds a whole new board, and then it adds a lot of new technology cards as well as new starting power cards. So I'm excited to see how this goes. It'll have you get some more asymmetry right from the get-go, which I think is great. It's things that I really like in Tzolk'in and Teotihuacan. So excited to play more of that. Going to go play some more Townsfolk Tussle, having a great time with that. As mentioned here earlier, it is such a great aesthetic, and it's a really approachable boss battler, and it's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of hidden content in the game that you can unlock based on your playthroughs. So I'm excited to play more of Townsfolk Tussle. Yeah, but that's what's going on here. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for everybody who's joined us in the comments. Thank you for everybody who's joined us live. We really appreciate all of the interaction. This has been fantastic, and I hope you're all having a fantastic new year. Oh, really quick, we got our explanation from Jonathan. Oh, so here we go. Very simplified description, but plays like heavy Euros with direct conflict. Not much wargaming there, but love the coin system. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Heavier, direct conflict-centric games. I like it. I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for that simplified explanation of coin system. But with that being said, that's everything. If you have any more questions or any comments about the games that we talked about here, please let us know in the comments of this video. If you haven't checked out Dan's channel over at Chairman of the Board, please make sure that you have. There's a link in the description. Go there, go subscribe. He puts out amazing content. Go check him out. Does some great work. Yeah. Anything else to add, Dan, before we close it up?
No, just thank you very much. Good episode. And yeah, thanks for having me on, as always.
Fantastic.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much again, everybody. Side game strong, y'all.
Bye, everyone.